Welcome to the Supplement Engineer Podcast. My name is Robert Chinetsky. Rejoining the podcast for his third appearance on the show, Mr. Matt Schifferle, founder of RDP, the Red Delta Project. Welcome, Matt. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, man. Happy Thanksgiving week. Fall is upon us. I am having a lot of fun with this cooler weather here out in Denver because it has been a hot summer. So I'm welcoming cooler weather, and the fall is always a time for me to be just really knuckle down and get productive. So I'm kind of on a tear these days.
That's awesome. It's the same word. I'm down here in Texas, and it's finally starting to feel like fall. Like we're almost into like official winter season, and we're starting to actually get into like the 60s and 70s more than like the 80s and 90s as we've been for the past 7-8 months or whatever it's been. This god awful heat that always seems to plague the South.
It has been a brutal summer, but glad we're getting towards the end of it.
Absolutely. And last time we spoke, it was the beginning of this whole quarantine nonsense. We were looking for ways to help people to get bodyweight training, make effective workouts at home. And I didn't think 8 months later we would be we would still be in these same circumstances. But
what have you? We all thought it was going to be, just a month or two and we'll get to the other side of this and things will go back to normal. And now we're in the middle of more flare-ups, and it's like, well, never mind about that. It just goes to show how unpredictable life can be and how much we need to be open-minded and very versatile and flexible in our approaches to things, because we just don't know what's coming down the pipe. No one's got that crystal ball that tells them exactly how things are going to go in the future. So we've got to be ready for anything.
Absolutely. So when you and I were setting up this podcast, you had mentioned that you alluded to that you had some new training methods that you were developing. So I'd like to jump right into that before some of the other topics I wanted to cover today. Can you give us a little bit of insight on some of these new training methods that you've developed?
Yeah. So the thing that we were talking about, and I was starting to sort of kind of explore a little bit, was especially the methods of isometric exercises back in the spring. That was something that I was just kind of getting into, and it's been something that's been getting a lot more traction and a lot more popular. It's one of the most searched for topics on my channel, and I released one of my latest books is Overcoming Isometrics that explores that topic much more in depth. And basically what it's all about is just really making us good at using our own muscles, or as I like to use the term, neuromuscular proficiency. Because at the most fundamental level, our ability to exercise effectively and safely and enjoyably boils purely down to how well can you use your own muscles? How good are you using your glutes? How well can you engage your core when you're doing these exercises? It's kind of like the body is a musical instrument, like a piano. And if I sat down at a piano, I could have the best training schedule, I could have the best shape music, the best instructors, but at the end of the day, my ability to either create great show tunes or shatter glass and make dogs howl will boil down to how well can I use that piano. And when it comes to exercise, it's the exact same thing. Whatever your goal is, whatever your objectives are, it boils down to how well can you use your own muscles. And so I've been aware of this idea for several years now, but being able to effectively train our ability to use muscle is not at all easy. It's actually very difficult because it's not something that anyone else can experience. As coaches, we have a bit of a trained eye. If someone's walking, we can be like, okay, they're not quite engaging their posterior chain, or their quads aren't quite engaged. But it's such a nuanced thing, and it's something that can only be experienced by the user. Because I can't, like, if you flex your biceps, I can't feel your biceps flexing, right? I can't be aware of how that feels for you. So it's long been a challenge of, well, how can we improve our ability to do this? And make no mistake, almost any training method will improve it to some degree, but almost nothing does it in a very reliable and consistent way, largely because the thing that controls tension in our body is our mind, is our brain. It's not the dumbbell in your hand. It's not the exercise. It's not the workout. It's ultimately your brain that controls your muscles in order to do the workout and the exercises and all of that. So I can tell you, do this workout, do these push-ups, do this plan, but whether or not your mind is using your muscles in a very constructive way is anybody's guess. And to a large degree, that means that your results are largely left up to chance, which isn't good. We don't want to gamble with this stuff. We want to know it's going to work.
Right.
So for the longest time, it's been a journey of mine to be like, well, how can we effectively train this in a safe and easy and efficient way so that people can get a handle on this? Because it really is hard to teach. It's one of those things. Muscle tension is one of those actions that we humans do that crosses the conscious and subconscious levels. It's kind of like breathing and talking and posture and all these other aspects of things that we can do if we take conscious control of it. But for the most part, we just do it subconsciously. We do it without any conscious thought. So as a result, when we start exercising or when we start applying the program, we're basically working off of whatever old neural programming we've had to begin with. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have good programming, well, you're kind of up a creek in many ways, and nothing you do in your workout will really fix it. You could do any program, use any tools, any rep ranges. It's always going to be roughly about the same general result. Mm-hmm. But the good news is once you improve that neuromuscular proficiency, everything is better. Like whatever you do works to a larger degree. You're just fine tuning things. It's kind of like, I don't care what your practice schedule on the piano. If you are good at playing the piano, you're going to be going to Carnegie Hall, sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So Isometrics was something that I got exposed to towards the end of last year. I started playing around with it. And basically that's been the answer to a very large degree of this is by far and away the most effective way that I've found to improve people's neuromuscular proficiency extremely quickly and very, very easily. So it took something that was very difficult, very time consuming, could take months, even years to start to whittle away at it, to something that produces results very, very quickly, noticeable results within a matter of days. And so that's kind of the new area that I've been diving into, is integrating this type of isometric training in along with traditional progressive calisthenics, weighted calisthenics, suspension training, and other methods that basically just brings the training level up to a much higher level of proficiency, safety, and it makes it really feel really good too.
Gotcha. Now, for the listeners out there that may not be familiar with the Overcoming Isometrics book or haven't, as familiar with the content on your channel, and, for you out there listening to this, I would highly recommend you go check out Matt's stuff. I've been watching your stuff for years, Matt, and it's been awesome. It's helped me considerably in my training, my programming, and all that. So for those of you looking for like simple ways to get shit done at home, go check out Matt's channel.
Thank you.
With that, where are you incorporating, for the people that may not be familiar with it, where are you incorporating these isometrics? Is it at the beginning of the workout as a way to like prime the pump, establish the mind-muscle connection? Is it later in the workout as kind of a burnout thing? Because, everything has to be the fundamental principle of improving hypertrophy, muscle growth, all the things that, we're trying to focus on with progressive calisthenics is building more muscle, getting better results with training with minimal, equipment and all of that stuff. So where is this kind of going? Because it's going to be kind of hard to progressively overload an isometric if you're not used to doing it. So how would you go about implementing it, and where do you, situate it in the workout?
Yep. Yeah. There are three main strategies that I use with the isometrics, depending on what you want to kind of get out of it. No matter how you do it, it's going to work. So the first thing I tell people is don't overthink this. Just literally apply it and let it rock and roll, because it's very hard to mess this stuff up. The only question is it going to work really well or really, really well? But it's kind of hard to mess this stuff up. So the first way that I use it, and this is probably my most common way, is I use it as a bit of a neural warm-up before any sort of heavier dynamic exercise. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it primes that neural pump. It gets things really going as far as turning on the muscles, getting those neural circuits woken up. It's very good, especially since a lot of us are coming to our workouts with kind of just this old neural pattern established by sitting all day. So we're sitting, we're hunched over, our bodies aren't ready to really work out. Even if we warm up and we kind of get our heart rate up and we break a sweat, our muscles are still kind of asleep and they're not really working together as they should, which is sometimes why we get hurt. So instead of having a like warm up where you're just kind of increasing core temperature and stuff, what I always recommend is going through some isometrics where you're going into the isometric of the exercise you're about to do. So pulling is warming up with pulling, pushing is warming up with pushing, squatting with push, and so on. It's not very complicated, and basically just working against an immovable force for about 5 to 10 seconds. When we're warming up with this, we don't want to exhaust the muscle. We want to save most of the exercise energy for the actual dynamic work to come. But doing that a few times, and I always tell people, do it as needed. Like some days you may just kind of hold a forceful position on isometric for 5 to 10 seconds once or twice and be like, yeah, I'm good to go. Let's rock and roll. Mm-hmm. Other times you could just be really cold, really not feeling it for the workout, and you go through that like 4 or 5 times. The whole point of using an isometric at the beginning of the workout is to make you feel like you are ready to tear doors off their hinges, to make you feel ready to rock and roll. And so do it as needed to get to that point where everything is working as one cohesive unit and you feel like your muscles are hungry for some heavy resistance. So that's a warm-up strategy. And that's normally what I primarily use it for because it's very effective for that. It helps to increase core temperature. It gets all the muscles to kind of knit together for especially compound movements. It also gets your breathing in check. So that way, if you sometimes when you're cold and you're stiff, you're not really ready for the exercise. You're doing pull-ups and you're holding your breath, that Valsalva maneuver. It teaches you how to create a lot of tension in your muscles while still having that relaxation in your diaphragm, so you don't have that Valsalva maneuver holding you back with repetitions, especially with like calisthenics. Of course, you can use it strategically in some exercise, but on the whole, for a lot of folks, the Valsalva maneuver where they're catching their breath is going to hold them back. It just tires them out faster than necessary. So it does a lot of things to prepare you for that. So that's warming up. Now you can integrate isometrics into your workout kind of as a superset. And this is a strategy that I use a lot. If you're just having one of those workouts where you just can't seem to fire on all cylinders, nothing's really going your way. Your mind's distracted. It just it feels flat. So what I'll do is I will superset the isometric of the exercise with the dynamic. And what that does is because it kind of layers on top of each other, but the isometric is so neurally accessible, like it doesn't take much to get into it. What it does is it makes it a lot easier to access a higher level of engagement in your muscles. So if it feels flat, it's like, okay, now I'm feeling it in my chest. Now I'm really feeling my back work a lot harder. It's a lot easier to work the muscle a lot harder. And it works for any type of scenario, but I usually reserve that type of application for when people are like, I just don't have it today. It's like, okay, we'll superset these two together, and it really makes them go to the next level. And then, yeah, for a burnout, it works fantastically well. Burnouts work very well for isometrics, especially from a safety standpoint, because if we want to do a finisher, a lot of things, if it's technically challenging, we need a lot of engagement in the posterior chain, we've got explosive movement, this stuff is fine and good, but when we're tired, we're at a greater risk of injury, and it's also just a lot harder to push ourselves pretty hard. We'll get like 5 reps in and be like, you know what, I'm done, I'm punching out kind of thing. With isometrics, because resistance and tension are always matched, you don't have nearly as much of a risk of overloading yourself. You can really dial in your technique, and it's a lot easier to hold it for a good period of time, which is really essential for that finisher. So going for about 2, maybe 3 sets, higher level of, or a higher duration, 30, 45 seconds is usually good, but everybody's a little bit different. I've had some people use isometrics for as little as 10 seconds for a finisher, depending on how smoked you are at that point. But it's a really good way to finish off and leave you feeling really satisfied at the end of a workout. So there's 3 ways that you can use isometrics. And I know it kind of may seem like, so should I use it on all 3 phases? Well, you can, but typically I find that people enjoy isometrics in one of the 3 phases primarily. Like for me, it's almost always in my warm-up. I don't really use it much as a finisher or in between sets for the most part. And it's just a matter of experimenting with it and seeing what feels best for you, because the biggest benefit of isometrics is it just makes your workouts feel really, really good. Like you have those best workouts where you just feel like everything's on point. You have those all the time now because of how isometrics gets everything working together.
Yeah, and you could extrapolate that to almost any other kind of advanced training technique, like drop sets, supersets, anything like that. You're not going to do that every set of every exercise of your workout. You'd be flatlining, a third of the way into your workout. So the same thing with this. You wouldn't want to do that all throughout every stage of your workout.
Exactly.
Quite often with this, you're using a special type of strap to do these overcoming isometrics. Is it necessary for people to have one of these special straps, or even could they get by with a yoga strap maybe, or is there just pure bodyweight alternatives? And then let's discuss some of the examples of what's like a good isometric for, that you're pushing muscles. How would you set up for a pulling one? And for legs, let's do one too.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of isometrics are very minimal equipment, just pressing your hands together, can engage your chest, pushing your hands down onto a tabletop or a countertop with your elbows in close can get your triceps woken up. Primarily what I like to use is what is known as in some circles as an overcoming isometric, which is where you are pushing or pulling against an object you can't possibly move. So if you held a plank, for example, that's in many cases what is known as a yielding isometric, where you have a set level of resistance and the amount of tension you need to generate in your muscles is governed by the minimum amount you need for that level of resistance. So if you want more tension, you typically need more resistance and so on. Overcoming isometrics, because you're pushing against an immovable object, resistance and tension are always matched. So the more I press against my palms, resistance increases, tension increases, and they're both. So that's typically what I'm talking about with this type of isometric planning. And no, you don't need equipment for most of it, but it certainly does help. There are three primary pieces of equipment that I use. One is what I call my Isoloop. This is just basically it's a cam buckle strap. It's a 1.5 wide nylon strap with a heavy duty cam buckle on one end. It's 10 feet long. And that you can use in a number of exercises because basically you're pushing or pulling against the strap. And that won't break. It won't stretch. It won't bend. It won't break on you. So you can pull and push as hard as you possibly can on it. It won't go anywhere. So that's the most simple way to go about it. Usually I recommend folks just use any kind of cam strap. I've had people use gymnastics rings. Some people have jerry-rigged suspension straps pretty well. The Isoloop, you can DIY it through the internet. You can just get a cam buckle strap that you can find online. A site that I get all my supplies off of is strapworks.com, and you can get it to custom length, custom colors. You may have a bit of a hassle getting it now. Their turnaround time has been considerably slow due to the whole Corona thing. But it is what it is. If you've got something lying around, it works pretty good. The other tool that I use is a ISO strap from a company called WorldFit. And it's kind of like a suspension trainer, but it's a little different, where it's, again, just a band of nylon with handles that you can adjust on cam buckles. And that's much more versatile. That gives you the ability to do things like deadlifts. Basically, any type of weightlifting exercise you can imagine, you can mimic with the Isoloop or with the ISO strap. Very cost efficient, very portable, easy to set up. Isometrics aren't supposed to take a lot of time. And you can do things like rows. So you lay down on the ground or you sit on the ground, you put it around your feet are together, and you just pull like a rowing on a row machine, like a cable machine. You just pull for everything that you're worth. Elbows are bent at about 90 degrees, shoulders are down and packed, lights up your entire back, biceps, forearms, rear deltoids, everything turns on instantly. And this is one of the things too, I should say too, about isometrics is it's one of these things you have to experience it to really understand it too. Because a lot of times people come to the table with isometrics and we've got this conceptual idea of what it's going to feel like and what it's going to do for us, but you really don't understand it until you apply it. And once you apply it, you understand much more of what you need. So to those who are listening, don't like go online and ask a bunch of opinion stuff. Just get yourself a set of straps, nylon. I've used a sheet when I first started playing with this. I just wrapped an old bed sheet around my feet and pulled on it. It just anything that you can push or pull against and it won't break on you. Do that and just give it a real hard effort, like max effort. As I tell my clients, go as hard as you can and then harder than that, because you're helping your brain understand that there's a level of intensity higher than what it currently believes is possible. So that's one, is pulling against your feet. You can wrap the same thing around your chest or around your back. And you push on the handles. That's like a bench press. The iso loop, what I'll do is I'll loop it around my back, get down in a push-up position with the strap underneath my hands, and I'll push like on a push-up, and that just, you know, resists me from pushing upwards. And that way I've got an isometric push-up. Squats and lunges are a cinch, especially with the iso loop. One of my favorites is I take the iso loop and I put it under my foot, front foot on a lunge. I'm down on the ground with my back knee on the ground. And then I run the loop over my shoulder, over one shoulder, and then down around the back of the other one. So it's kind of like a bandolier style diagonal. And then you lean onto that foot and you push straight up against that loop. It will not move, and your whole leg is going to go nuts. It's going to go crazy. I've had people who, again, they're kind of like, I don't know, isometrics, it's kind of a gimmicky thing. It's kind of this. And I was like, okay, try this. And the second they do it, they're looking at me like, holy mother of hell. Like, what the, like, because their legs never worked that hard before.
Yeah.
They're like, because anything we do with movement requires less tension. In order for you to move, your muscles have to be relaxed to some degree. So this is why the more resistance you have, the more tension you create, the slower you go. So if you throw something very light, like a wad of paper into the trash bin, you can throw it really quick. But if you were to press 50 pounds or something, you're not going to move it nearly as quickly because there's much more tension in the muscle. Well, with isometrics, it's max tension because there's no movement. So people usually are not aware of that amount of workload on their muscles before. So it's kind of a shock to their system, especially for the legs in that regard. Abs, one of my favorites is to take the iso straps or the iso loop, just sling it over something overhead. You grab onto the handles and you basically just pull down with your abdominals. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's kind of like the cable crunches that old school bodybuilders would do, where your hands are kind of more in front of you and you just pull down and your abs light right up. That's a good one that I give a lot of people because abdominal activation is chronically weak in many, many people. That's why most people can't develop their abdominal strength very much. It doesn't matter how many crunches you do. It doesn't matter how long you can hold a plank. I don't care how great you can rule that core class. Most of us are walking around with terrible abdominal engagement, which means almost nothing you do will ever work very well. But once you get those suckers turning on, then all of a sudden everything works great. All the crunches, the planks, the core class, everything works way, way better because you're engaging them to a much higher degree. So that's an exercise I give a lot of people. Really, really effective. Helps you really tuck in that pelvis, gets that posterior tilt. So you become aware of that and it lights up your entire abdominal, your rectus abdominals. For the posterior chain, that doesn't require any equipment. This is an exercise I recommend for a lot of people, is to get into a table plank. So this is a plank where you're sitting on the floor, your hands are behind you. It's kind of like you're going to do a crab walk in gym class back in grade school. And you lift your hips up, so you're kind of forming a table, but your shins are vertical, your thighs are parallel to the floor, then your torso, and then down into your arms. And you squeeze the floor together, primarily with your hamstrings. So your shoulders are retracted as much as possible, and you're basically trying to pull your hamstrings back as much as you can. A lot of people, their hamstrings will cramp on that the first time they do it. So be gentle on it. And again, it's because they're not used to working their hamstrings that hard. Their nervous system gets overloaded very quickly because they've never had to deal with that much resistance before. But it's something you get accustomed to very quickly. And that's one of the reasons why isometrics works so well, is it works on programming your body on a neural level. And the great thing about your nervous system, it adapts like that. It's very, very quick adaptation. You should notice a difference in how the exercises feel within, like I said, like 48 hours. It should be that quickly. A couple of weeks, change your life. So it's very, very quick. But when you go into it, if something feels a little off, don't worry, it won't stay that way. And lastly, for the lateral chain, that one's another one you don't need much equipment for, is just stand next to a countertop or something, stick your arm out to the side onto the countertop and push down as hard as you can into that palm. And that should light up everything on the side of your body that's facing towards the countertop. Those are some of the best, the more popular isometric drills that I give people, especially for their warm-ups, that just lights everything up in the body and gets them really ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, perfect. A few minutes ago, you mentioned the cable crunches that bodybuilders used to do, and this has always got me curious. You know, bodybuilding started off as something like an athletic pursuit. Like, you had to look good, but you also had to be functional as well. You had to be able to do, you know, flips or handsprings or some kind of functional maneuver. And these guys trained calisthenics progressively back then. Why don't you think we see much calisthenics, if at all? I mean, some bodybuilders might do some like half-ass push-ups to like burn out their chest at the end of a workout, but why don't we see more calisthenics in some of these higher profile guys' routines, or see them espouse the benefits of it? I guess
quite a few of them. If you look at guys like Cali Muscle, you know, and stuff, like, you do see a lot more calisthenics than people realize. There's a lot of stuff out there that is calisthenics based with additional weight, which I would still classify it as a calisthenics. Basically, anything where you're moving your body through space would qualify. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is that the nature of training over time has changed to the point where it's all about working the muscle with as low a skill level as possible. And to a degree, that's a very good thing. Because if you just want to make your muscles bigger and stronger, the only thing you need to be concerned with is how well and how hard can you work that muscle. Mm-hmm. And in that regard, what you want to do is the easiest, simplest, least technically challenging exercise available. Like, what can you do with as little concentration? So your ability to contract that muscle as hard as possible and as long as possible is the only thing you really have to focus on. So in that regard, things like the Nautilus machines and stuff like that are by far the most effective way to go about it, because you barely have to think in order to use those. So you just push yourself as hard as you can. Mm-hmm. So that's the way to go about it. However, the history of bodybuilding, as you had alluded to, was based on this skillful proficiency. The old Muscle Beach used to actually be primarily a calisthenics gym. Right. It's rings and parallettes and people doing acrobats and stuff like that on the beach and stuff. And then the weight pits and stuff came later on. Mm-hmm. And for most of human history, this is how exercise actually was, because natural movement of the body always requires a balance in three areas. You need strength, you need stability, and you need mobility. You need all three of those for most natural types of activity and exercise. Mm-hmm. So what we've done effectively is tried to sort of, I would hesitate to use the term, but dumb down our training. So we remove the stability and the mobility component as much as possible, because these days, most people are chronically deprived in those areas. Especially when it comes to the lower body, right? Especially lower mobility in the hips, forget about it, because we're sitting so much. Stability in the hips, again, forget about it. You ask someone to stand on one leg and circle their knee, and they can't do it. And this is stuff that we all should be able to do very easily. But the fact of the matter is that those three aspects, strength, stability, and mobility, happen in a holistic nature. Each one limits the other one in real world. So this is where that whole functional training thing came about in like the late 90s, early 2000s, is because they noticed that, well, we're getting big, strong muscles on like a leg press, but because our stability and our mobility are being compromised, you can move a lot of weight on a leg press, but you ask someone to climb up a mountain and they just get destroyed. Or you ask them to carry a couch. This happened all the time for me when I was working in the fitness equipment field. I used to deliver exercise equipment. And in the busier time in the winter, we would hire a guy or a couple of folks or something from the local gyms, and they'd be like, yeah, I get deadlift so much and I work out all the time. Like, great, you're hired, wonder.
Yeah.
And without fail, they would be able to lift up the treadmill, but they couldn't carry it through a house to save their life because they didn't have any stability. They'd be like, okay, I'm strong and fine as long as I don't move. But you ask them, okay, now we got to go up this staircase and tilt it and shift it around, and you got to bend backwards and watch out for the dog biting at your heels. And they'd be like, dude, I can't do this. I got to put it down. I can't do this kind of thing. And so it was a wake-up call that, yeah, we can have strength, but without the stability and mobility aspect, we're missing something. But when it comes to natural exercise, we can't miss out on those things. If you want to do a pistol squat or dips or one-arm pull-ups and stuff, you naturally have those things integrated. So coming back to your question, bodybuilders, they don't need that functional aspect to it. They don't need the stability and the mobility. They're perfectly fine without it. In fact, they're probably better off using methods that minimize it as much as possible just to get as much tension as they can into that muscle. Mm-hmm. That's what they focus on. It's just like any other sport. You want to be good at your sport, get really good at a very narrow range of activity. Like if you're a sprinter on track and field, you don't need to worry about how far you can throw a javelin unless you're in decathlon or something, right? So this is what has happened. But the problem is our approach to strength training within our fitness culture is largely bodybuilding based, which means most of our approaches to a large degree have been based off of a sport, which is kind of a little weird if you think about it. Imagine parallel universes where they're like, yeah, our approach to fitness is based off football training. And another universe, our approach to fitness is based off of soccer. So instead of people saying, how much can you bench? Everybody's like, what's your 40 time? What's your 40-yard time? How far can you throw a football? I'm trying to get in shape, so I need more distance on my football or my free throw shot percentage and stuff like that. It is a little weird to understand, but we've based most of our approaches to physical conditioning off of a sport, which is great for conditioning for that sport, but not for general physical conditioning. Mm-hmm. So that's for bodybuilding. But unless you're a bodybuilder, that's not the way I would go about it, because when you end up being one of those people who's like, I've got bigger and stronger muscles, but I can't really do much with it in real life, that's when we run into the problems. So the question is, if you want to be a bodybuilder, yeah, I would say minimize the quote unquote skill aspect of training as much as possible. Use as little of that skillful application as you can to get as much tension in the muscles. But if you want to get more of a holistic approach and be like, dude, I got my legs so strong, I'm totally tearing up these ski runs, you're going to need a lot more than just stronger muscles. Because you need that mobility, you need stability, you need the ability to have that reaction timing and stuff. And you cannot develop all of that on a leg press. There's just no way, because it's just too narrow in its dimension. But you can get a lot of that with jump squats. You'll get all of that with jumps, which is why I give jump squats and jump lunges and stuff to people when they're doing ski conditioning training this time of year. It's like, just do this one thing, you'll get all of your bases covered. So that's why when it comes to like calisthenics, it is very different from what bodybuilders do. And it's kind of almost a little bit of a pet peeve of mine when people will say, well, it can't be very effective because you don't see bodybuilders or pro bodybuilders doing this sort of thing. Well, first off, bodybuilders do pull-ups, bodybuilders do push-ups, bodybuilders do dips, bodybuilders do lunges and squats. Like the basic fundamental movements that calisthenics is based off of, bodybuilders have been using for centuries and they're still using them. Right. And so that didn't change. But when it comes to kind of an apples to orange comparison, like I would say, well, yeah, you don't see NASCAR drivers doing push-ups in pit lane either, but we're not talking about NASCAR. We're not talking about bodybuilding either. We're talking about being able to do general physical preparation and conditioning to cover all of your bases. If you want to go and specialize in something, then yeah, do that specialist thing. But unless you're interested in doing that specialty of a sport, then it's not applicable to what you're trying to do.
Perfect. This other question, I'm not sure if it's a rabbit hole I really want to go down. I'm just kind of curious as to your thoughts. Do you think we would It would be possible. We scratch the IFBB Pro bodybuilder discussion because they're loaded up on all those special sports supplements that we're not, this is not
Vitamin
the
S.
podcast. Yes, those extra special vitamins. Do you think it's possible to get maybe like to the level of musculature for a natural bodybuilder using like the grind style calisthenic movements and like fundamental calisthenic movements, provided you've got the proper progressive overload? Like you could get the same amount of musculature and physique without ever touching a machine necessarily?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because fundamentally, we're still doing the same thing. There's not really any different. We've got this perceived difference in our head that we're using a different tool, but fundamentally, we're still weightlifting. Fundamentally, we're still using the exact same movement patterns. Fundamentally, we're still using the same muscles in the same way, open versus closed chain movements and stuff. But at the very rock bottom level, we're still doing the same thing. So it's definitely, certainly possible. That, and when you really list out all of the things that come into play for someone's potential to build a muscular physique, training method is actually a very small part of that influence. Mm-hmm. Very, very small. And one method versus another, it's really not that different when it comes down to what you're making your muscles do. I mean, if I bend my elbow, my bicep contracts. Like, it doesn't know if I'm doing a particular exercise. Like, muscles don't know exercises. They don't know programs. They don't know workouts. They don't know different things. All they know is, oh, I got to work now. Okay. How hard? How long? That's the only information they're getting. Yeah. How hard do I need to work and for how long? And the rule is still exactly the same. Progressive overload, progressive muscle tension, as I call it. You make it work longer and harder, it's going to get the same exact result than you would otherwise. Granted, all of the other pieces are in place. Your genetics, your lifestyle, your sleep, your diet, all of those other things, which actually are much more of a bigger piece of the muscle building puzzle than your workout. And I feel people get too focused on their workouts. The analogy I always use is like building up a bigger body is like building up a big bonfire, right? Mm-hmm. And your workout is the match. Now you need that, you need that spark, you need that Zippo lighter to ignite it. But ultimately your ability to build a big bonfire has almost nothing to do with that match. It's how much wood do you have? Do you have an igniter? Do you have kindling? Is it made in the right way? Or is it just piled up stacks of pallets and stuff? That bonfire structure and what it's made of is by far a bigger influence and more of a determining factor on how big the bonfire is. All you're doing with your workout is bringing that match. And once you've got that covered, like, yeah, I'm working my muscles hard and progressive. Good, you're done. That's it. Like your workout has gone as far as you possibly can. You've gotten as much as you can out of it, regardless of if you're doing pull-ups or pull-downs or curls or whatever. As long as you're telling your biceps, hey, work harder than you did last time, they're like, okay, you're applying the same exact match or Zippo lighter or whatever. It's like, does it matter if it's a wooden match or a cardboard match? No, it's flame. As long as you got that flame, it's going to do the same thing. Don't worry about it. Stop, splitting hairs and trying to think, well, I'm sure it'd be a bigger bonfire if I used a wooden match versus a Zippo lighter. Meanwhile, you got a little twig you're trying to light up. It's like, no, you're dealing with something that's not that important. Meanwhile, you should be focusing on other things that, like, are you sleeping enough? Are you eating enough? Are you just bringing a good attitude to the workout?
100%.
I mean, that alone is huge. The first time I ever worked out in a gym was the UVM weight room. I guess I hesitate to call it a weight room. It's more like a glorified closet. And when I would go there, there were two groups of people. There was one guy who I think was the head of strength and conditioning for UVM. And I mean, these guys were power lifters. They were almost coming to blows with each other over their deadlifts, like smacking each other, like, get the fuck up, you guys. Right. And next to him, there's this kid, and I still remember this kid this day, and he just looked like he didn't want to be there. Like, he's just curling. He's like, can I leave now? And then he's curling like 5-pound dumbbells, and when he's done, he just kind of like drop. And he'd just sag and be like, all right, now what? And it's just night and day between the intensity. That, I would say, would be a far more determining factor on your ability to build your physique than what the actual exercise is. Because it's all up in there. It's all up in here too. If you bring that that's what's most important. The final point I'll make is it's more about what you bring to the exercise than what the exercise brings to you. If those hollering and screaming guys did calisthenics, they would get insanely strong in results. Versus the other guy, he could be in the Olympic Training Center here in Colorado Springs. He's going nowhere.
Perfect. Well said. And that's analogous to a lot of the questions I'll receive sometimes. They're saying, well, this will be somebody that's just like a novice to the gym or training or whatever. And they'll say, hey, I'm looking to get bigger. What pre-workout and what protein shake should I take? Because I want to get as big as possible. I'm thinking, man, just like what you said, it's the match to the bonfires. Like this, what pre-workout you're using, what protein powder you're going to take after your workout. Yep. I mean, that means almost nothing in context with if you're not sleeping right, if you're not eating enough, if you're not sleeping, if you're stressed out of your mind and all this other stuff. It means nothing in the macrocosm of everything in fitness.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I find that people get lost in is most of the noise out there on the internet and what people are talking about is the superficial extrinsic details. You know, it's not the deep fundamental stuff that's really important. It's not that it's not important. Everything has an influence. If I eat one M&M, that's an influence to my calorie balance. It's a tiny one, granted, but it is there. And that's what I find people, they get lost in the details of the superficial stuff up top. And instead, it should be much more focused on the deeper stuff. Like, are you getting your sleep? Are you eating enough? Is it good, whole, satisfying foods? Are you progressive in your training? Like, I don't care what your training looks like. If it's not progressive, you're going nowhere. But if you are saying, yep, here in my logbook, I got 2 more reps of that. I don't care what it was. Like 2 more reps of what? Doesn't matter. 2 more reps of anything is going to be telling your body it needs to change. So it's like, are you progressively training? Are you training with focus, or are you just constantly scrolling through Facebook for the umpteenth time in between sets and stuff? Those are the deeper fundamental stuff that really matters. And the stuff that we get distracted by, the details, really, honestly, it doesn't matter that much. It really doesn't. And that's a voice I'm trying to make more prevalent in our fitness culture, because I feel like the rhetoric and the noise out there is that every little detail is so crucially important. Oh my God, you have to get everything perfect in order to stand any chance of gains. And the voice I want to put out there is like, look, 90% of the stuff out there really isn't that important. If it is, you'll figure it out pretty quick. Right. You know, you'll learn real fast. Like, should you work out in the morning or the night? 9 times out of 10, not going to make any difference at all. But you could work out in the morning and then for a week work out at night and be like, oh, my workouts are so much stronger at night. Okay, there you go. There's your answer. But that's the extrinsic detail stuff is only going to be just whatever it is for you. And the only way you're going to know that is just try and see, experience.
Yeah, but especially from like our end of stuff is that supplement companies make a killing off majoring and convincing consumers they need to major in the minors. You know, stop. Are you stressing? Like, do you need to take a supplement for this? You need to use just this right workout program. Are you doing like X, Y, and Z? If not, you're losing your gains. I'm just thinking, man, we are overcomplicating so much. It seems like we're almost discouraging people from joining into a life of health and fitness, than encouraging them by putting out all this noise.
Yeah. Sweat the details. That's the message that's out there. Sweat the details. And the problem is those details are true. Like when they talk about cortisol levels and make sure you've got the right amino acid profile and all these sorts of things, everything they're saying is 100% true. The problem is it's that important.
Yeah, the magnitude of effect is so inconsequential.
Like, this is scientifically validated. And I'm like, yeah, it's scientifically validated that eating 1 M&M is going to add calories and sugar to my diet. But is it big enough of an influence to really matter? Not really. And that's where we really got to focus on, because if we're so caught up in this evidence-based approach of like, well, if it's proven to be true, that means it's important. Not necessarily. There's a lot of stuff out there that's 100% true, but it's not really that important.
Agreed. At the beginning of our discussion, you mentioned that this time of year really ramps up your productivity. So what, I guess, personal things do you go through in a day, or what other little tricks, tips that help you be more productive? What do you do to, like, I guess, get in your creative mindset?
Well, planning is a big part of it. Just taking a moment and looking at the day ahead and saying, okay, what do I want to do and when can I do it? Because if my day is always very scattershot all over the place, and there's very little consistency to my routine. So I need to sit down and look at my schedule and be like, I've got a 2-hour block here. That's where I'm going to get my workout in, and I'm going to make my video, and I'm going to work on my book. Because if I don't, I'll talk to a friend and I'll check email and I'll get lost in a YouTube rabbit hole. And before I know it, that 2 hours is gone and I didn't get anything done. So just getting a little bit of a plan of what you want to do the next day goes a really, really long way. There's also just something about this time of year that just, I don't know if it's from back in my school days, because I had to work super, super hard as a student in order to pass all my classes. I wasn't a very smart student, so I had to work twice as hard to get half the grades. So it's like once that fall weather hits, it's like my brain is like, all right, it's go time. Like fun time is over. You've got to knuckle down and you've got to get things done big time, because if you don't, you're going to get run over real quick by momentum. So it's just something about this time of year with that mindset. If I got to get things done and accomplished. Plus with the holidays coming up, people get distracted with holiday time and stuff. And before you know it, it's January and you're like, oh, I didn't get that project done. It's like, well, you had 2 months beforehand. So that it's just a mindset thing that I have. Creativity is not at all something I struggle with. I'm just kind of a faucet of it. And I find one of the best things we can do to be creative is to get away from consumption of information, to let our mind digest things. Like get away from the internet, get away from friends and family and stuff. Like go out for a bike ride, go out for a walk. Get outside is pretty good, but let your brain digest all of the information it's come into contact with. And that way it can put the pieces together. And when you come back, you're like, I've got this great idea. And that way that you can be more productive with that.
Would you include like leaving like the headphones at home too when you go on these walks, or you go out for a bike ride? So like not listening to music, not listening to a podcast or anything like that to help kind of get.
I listen to music. I listen to a lot of instrumental music without any words. Sometimes for me, my brain kicks in if it is talking. Like if someone's talking, if I hear someone talking on a podcast or talk radio or something, it's like something in my head kicks on and it starts the conversation in my own head. So sometimes that'll help me break out of like creative ruts and I'll get a lot of the wheels turning.
Gotcha. Do you ever deal with burnout? Like you've been putting out content consistently for a number of years now, both through your books and through the RDP YouTube channel and with the podcast as well. Do you ever get into a rut where you're just like, man, I don't know what I'm going to film today. I don't know what I'm going to do. Or you just get to those periods of like low motivation, burnout, where you just like, I'm done. I can't say any more on this topic, but people still seem to be wanting something about it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Burnout is just a case of you've been going hard and heavy for a while and you need a bit of a break. And in those cases, it's fine to take your foot off the gas a little bit, scale back, bring your attention towards other things. That's perfectly fine. Everything's going in cyclical seasons. Like we can't just push ourselves super hard in a workout all day, every single day. We have to go through cycles of rest and recovery and then productivity and workload. So when that's happening, listen to what's going on. Don't force it, because it's not the end of your productivity cycle. It's not the end of, oh, I'll never think of another great idea or come up with another book idea or something again. It's like, no, this is how you generate these things. I'm always using the analogy of like climbing Mount Everest. You're supposed to plateau. And when you climb Everest, you can't go up it in one shot. Your whole strategy of climbing it is we're going to go up here and then we're going to purposely stop at base camp or at camp 1 or 2. And we're going to let our body acclimate. And that's usually when we're starting to get burned out. That's the perfect opportunity to just kind of say, okay, let me just sit back here and just see what's going on. Let me look at what people are saying. Let me take a read on how I'm feeling about things and stuff, because you need to acclimate to what's going on. You could put out, a series of podcasts or informations, or you're doing a workout, right? And you change something about it. Maybe you went to a heavier program or something. You got all this new stuff coming in, but you haven't given your body or your mind the ability to acclimate to it. So when you're burning out, that's your mind and your body saying, hang on, give me a second here. Let me get used to this. I want to get used to this. Let me get comfortable with this new level, this new situation here. And I know a lot of times people are like, oh, you don't want to get used to it and stuff. No, that's entirely the point. The whole reason why we train is to get used to a higher level. So we get used to it. We acclimatize to our new level of thought or physical ability. But once you start to acclimatize to it, everything kicks into high gear again. It's like, all right, let's go. Next camp, let's go for the summit. Let's keep climbing up, because then you're ready and you're ready to rock and roll and you don't have to force it.
Perfect. Walk us through a little bit of your writing process, because I do a fair amount of that on the content side as well. And I'm always curious what other people that are putting out really great content do. Are you very much, you stick by like an outline when you're brainstorming stuff? Do you just kind of like go like a free brain dump and you start writing? How do you go about when you're approaching coming up with a new book?
So when I'm coming up with a new writing project, even if it's just a blog post or a podcast or something, I always start with the outline. And sometimes I'll spend more time writing the outline than I will the entire book. Because what I'll do is I'll open up desktop, Google Docs, and I'll create an outline. And I'll have just my major bullet points, and those are my chapters, and then bullet points for those and bullet points for those. And I'll keep that on my desktop for several weeks. And I'll keep Google Docs open and ready to go on my phone. Because when you're writing out that outline, you never know. You just be walking along from your car to the grocery store and you're like, oh, right, I got to mention so-and-so. So you pull it out, bullet point number 6, make sure you mention 5x5 training or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So the outline takes time to develop. And I'll give that several weeks. And once I feel like the outline is about where it needs to be, then I'll just fill in each point. And I'll just fill in, and I'll go through section by section, usually just top to bottom. And that way I know I'm going in a kind of a linear thought process, because every section needs to make sense to the other sections. It's nothing that's just coming out of left field. And so that way it all kind of gels and flows together. If I feel like some new topic comes up, I'll make sure to bullet point that into what it is, or maybe add another chapter. What I do is I do this all in Google Docs. So what I do is each chapter is a header and each bullet point is in bold. And then in Google Docs, you can see the outline on the left side of your screen. Yep. So then you can jump around to your document by clicking on each of those areas. So it's really easy to get your draft out and to edit it and put information in, because you have your outline and you have your document right there, and you can skip around to wherever you need to if you need to. From whenever I'm writing and I need an image, I'll just put picture of such and so here, because the images are the very last thing you need to do, but you want to know where they're going to be and what they're going to be about. Then I take that and I put it through several editors just to get the grammar and everything right. I'll send it out to a couple of people and say, does it even make sense? And is this cohesive, or do you even know what I'm talking about? Because sometimes when I write my books, like, I'm coming out with some ideas that are way left of center. Yeah. Every time I write a book, my intention is to change lives. I don't want to give you another workout strategy or, I'm using this new strategy to kind of change things. I want you to read that book, and every workout you do for the rest of your life is on a whole nother level. That's my goal with every book that I write. So some of those ideas are going to be kind of out there, but they need to be acceptable. So I'll give it to people and be like, does this make sense? Is this something you can apply, or are you left feeling like great information, but what do I do with this? Because it has to be applicable. And once I have that, just a couple of more edits, then I'll put it into the Google format for Kindle and paperback and stuff. And finally, I'll add the images. And that once the images are in, done, good, send it off, ready to rock and roll.
Perfect. With these fitness ideas, training ideas, nutrition that are, as you said, left of center, where do these sources of inspiration come from? Is it just something that just happens? Do you see something and it sparks an interest in your eye? Does it maybe like a different training program that you see or training technique and you think, well, maybe I could put a riff on it and this might make it more effective or more accessible to people that are looking to do bodyweight training?
No, it's all down to understanding my fundamental approach to fitness. The Red Delta Project is based on a fundamental approach to fitness, understanding the basic laws of Mother Nature. How does the universe work? Laws of physics, that sort of thing. Laws of man, laws of human nature. Like, what sort of laws do we have? And the more I understand these fundamental laws that govern how the universe works and how human beings work, then it's just a matter of, let's create a program that works with these laws. And far too often, we go the other way around, where we create a program and then we say, okay, humans, you've got to conform to this. You've got to force yourself to follow this. How many times have people said, oh, it works if you do the work or if you're willing to do what it takes? And that's kind of like me creating a tennis shoe and forcing it onto someone's foot. And someone comes in and they're like, I want a pair of shoes. I'm like, great, size 9 tennis shoes. That's what you need. Well, I have size 10 feet and I want to go hiking up a 14er here in Colorado. Nope, size 9 tennis shoe. And then when it doesn't fit, we blame the person. We're like, I guess you got broken feet. You got the wrong foot, man. This shoe is designed by science. It is designed to be perfect. It is infallible and stuff. You must be the one who's having trouble. We can't plan like that. Mother Nature's in charge, first and foremost. The universe has its laws in place. It builds and destroys galaxies by these laws. We have to obey them or ignore or fight them at our own peril. So first and foremost, Mother Nature's in charge. Second of all, human nature will always win out. The laws of human nature will win out. The things like our need for instant gratification, our tendency to go along the path of least resistance. These things win every single time. It's just a matter of time. Everybody breaks if they fight these things. So all I need to do is recognizing these things. Well, let's make programs that fit these things then. So someone comes in and they're like, okay, I'm hiking Mount Pikes Peak, size 10 feet. Good. I'm going to make you custom shoes for exactly that trail and exactly your feet. It's going to be a perfect fit. And they're like, oh, these feel great. This is amazing. Never hiked so well. Yes, that's what we can do in fitness. Everything about our approach to diet and exercise is made up. It's not real. It's not something we have to stick with. So that's what drives me crazy when people are like, well, this is the way it's done. So change it. So modify it. Like, there's no rule unless it's governed by the rule of a sport kind of thing. Then right. Yeah, you've got to go with the rule of the sport. But in general health and fitness, people are like, but I don't like using this tool. Fine, we won't use it. Like, there's no good reason to do that exercise or do this if it doesn't match your circumstances. Change it, whatever you want. As long as it's in alignment with the laws of nature and with human nature, you're going to get there, and you're going to get there a hell of a lot easier and a heck of a lot faster. So recognizing this, now it's just a matter of, well, how do we do that? And that's where all my information comes from.
All right, excellent. In wrapping things up here, Matt, you did release some 2.0 changes to the grind style calisthenics not too long ago. Can you enumerate on some of the updates and changes that you released with that?
Yep. So the changes are just the constant evolution of the grind style program. If you're not those who are listening not familiar with it, grind style calisthenics is a program designed to improve that neuromuscular proficiency that I was talking about earlier, to actually make you good at exercise. So it's not just about pushing you hard, but actually improve your ability to do the exercises. So the workouts are in 4 phases. The first phase is tension control and muscle activation phase. That's where the isometrics typically come into play. That's waking up the muscles, getting them engaged, getting them to knit together, okay? Second phase is your stability phase, where we use a lot of shifting work back and forth. That helps to develop the control, the coordination, and the stability of the body, which is super important because that leads into the second phase, which is the strength phase, where we are working our muscles to a very high level of intensity, typically low repetitions. And then we have the finisher phase, where we're just blasting out the muscle, whatever it's got left. just reps like crazy, go until you're just peeling yourself off the floor. The reason why it works in that format is because you can only build a muscle to the degree of your strength. You can only build strength to the degree of your stability. You can only build stability to the degree of your muscle engagement. So a lot of times when we go into our workouts just willy-nilly, one of those 4 things is missing. And if it's missing, it's going to limit the ones above it. So like I was saying earlier about muscle activation in the abs, I don't care what program you're using, it's not going to work very well. I don't care how hard you're working, it's not going to work very well. So by going in that format, one is it's a very nice and easy way to warm up. It's very gentle on the body. It's great for the nervous system. It feels amazing, but it works in that natural way of working with how the body works. That laws of Mother Nature too. It also works with human nature, because when we're starting off, we want to kind of ease in to our workouts and kind of dip our toe in the water. And that's what the tension and the stability phase does. And then once we're feeling good and ready to rock and roll, we hit you hard and so on. Very satisfying. So the changes that I made to grind style was, first and foremost, was I made the overcoming isometrics the primary mode of training for tension phase control. That's mostly what is in the book, but there are also just some flexion exercises, bodybuilding style flexing exercises that work pretty good for that. But the overcoming isometrics works way a hell of a lot better. So that's the first thing, is overcoming isometrics. Gotcha. The stability phase was largely untouched, but there was a change I made to that, which I made to the other ones that I'll mention here in a second. The strength phase, low repetitions. So in the book, I originally said up to 15 reps and trying to get up to that level. Now it's no more than 8, because we want the intensity high. We want you want to be going on that strength end of the spectrum as much as possible. Usually for strength stuff, I'm usually around 5 to 6. Like 5 by 5 works great for this. 6 by 4, 4 by 6, that sort of thing. And then hypertrophy phase is got to be more than 10. The resistance that you're using has to be at least 10, because you want to just push that muscle into that red zone and hold it as hard as you possibly can. So those are the biggest changes, was lower reps in the strength phase, higher reps in the hypertrophy phase. Originally, they were a little too close to one another. So the stimulus generated by each one was pretty similar. And we want to make sure that each phase of grind style is very different, that it's teaching our body a different set of instructions. So it got rid of redundancy, and it also increased the ability to create that stimulus. And the last thing that I made to it was the ability to have more of a flexible approach to the number of sets that you're using. Because each set or each phase has an objective. We're trying to turn on our muscles. We're trying to feel strong and confident. We're trying to feel like we're working our muscles to a very high degree, and we're trying to burn out our muscle to a good amount of fatigue. Now, how many sets should you do? Like everybody's always, I don't know how many sets, 3 sets, 5 sets. The biggest change that I made in Grind Style 2.0 is do as many sets as necessary. If you can get it done in 2 sets, great. If it takes 5, it takes 5. Because if I give you a set number, chances are that's not going to be right. Because you could be hitting your stride in your strength phase after 2 sets, be like, oh yeah, now I'm really feeling like I can generate some strength. Nope, that phase is over, move on. It's like, no, I'm just getting started. But at the same time, if I say, okay, let's do 6 sets here, and after 2, you're like, dude, my muscles are just shot. Like, I don't have much left in them. Like, nope, you have to force yourself to keep going. It's like, why? Like, you're not getting more of a strength stimulus by doing more sets. It's needless work.
Right.
So by focusing on accomplishing the specific objective of the phase, and therefore giving you the freedom to say, do the sets that need to be done, you stand a much greater chance of achieving that objective without any needless work, but at the same time, making sure you're doing enough work to achieve that objective.
Gotcha. With these strength sets, since you're working in, maybe the 5 to 8 rep range, we'll pick that. Are you slowing down the rep tempo? Are you increasing the range of motion? Are you adding weight to these movements? Because most body weight movements, that people are going to jump to the mind, pull-ups, lunges, body weight squats, pistol squats, push-ups, dips. Most people can probably do at least 8 reps of those. Maybe not the pistol squat, because that requires a pretty high degree of balance and ankle mobility and whatnot.
Yeah.
What are you doing to get yourself to fail in that rep range?
So I'm using usually a combination of progressive calisthenics technique and or weighted calisthenics. So, for example, my chest training these days, one of the workouts may be like archer push-ups, and I'm really loading up that arm as much as I can. So it's typically 6 reps max on each side. And then another day I may do like weighted dips, and I do them on suspension straps, so they're even harder. So I'll only need like 20, 30 pounds to get that. And that typically ends up being like a 5x5. So progression from that is usually weighted version. So if I'm doing my archer push-ups, I'll load more weight onto that arm, just more and more, because I want that rep range to stay low. I don't want it to be like, oh, I've got 12 reps. No, it's too light. Heavy. We got to go heavy. That's the purpose of this phase. We got to go heavy. So really, really, really heavy. And I like progressive calisthenics for the purpose that I can change the resistance mid-set and even mid-rep. So if I'm like doing commando pull-ups, for example, and I got too much weight on my assistant's arm, and I'm at like 5, I'm like, nah, it's too light, and I'll take a finger off. Or I'll just go on my finger belly. Like, okay, there's more resistance. Wow, okay, that's a lot harder. So I can change it in order to always stick within that same rep range. And yeah, commando pull-ups for pulling, weighted pull-ups are another way to go. Shrimp squats for the legs, weighted shrimp squats. I do all of my leg training with some sort of upper body assist, because again, it's a little more on that bodybuilder side. The whole idea with grind style is, especially during that strength and hypertrophy phases, I want to take more of that bodybuilder approach and make stability and mobility less of a limiting factor. Because if we want to work our muscles as hard as possible, we need to make the exercise require less quote unquote skill aspect to it. So it's relatively low skill. Grind style calisthenics is all about minimizing the amount of skill necessary. We're still getting stability. We're still getting mobility, because that's what the stability phase and the tension control phase is all about. But during those last 2 phases, we want to really minimize, like if we're doing shrimp squats and we're struggling with our stability there, we can't work our muscles hard enough, because our stability is that limiting factor. Right. So by having a hand on something, I'm just lightly putting it on, just reduces the challenge on the stability, so I can work my strength component to a much, much, much higher level.
Great. Yeah, and I would recommend anybody that's looking for more information on that, go check out. You released a video last week about why you never prescribe unassisted leg movement, single leg work in the tension control or the strength building phase of the program. So everybody can check that out.
Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty much almost without exception. I don't have people do pistol or shrimp squats or even sometimes lunges without upper body support. I want them to feel very strong and stable, because the more stable you are, the stronger you are.
Awesome. All right, Matt, I know you need to get running, sir. This has been a blast. I wish we could go for another hour and a half. There's so much more I want to pick your brain about, but we'll save that for a return venture, hopefully. So thank you for your time, and shamelessly plug anything and everything you'd like to at this time.
Wonderful. So yeah, anything people are looking for, Red Delta Project. Google it, search it on any platform, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you'll find it, Red Delta Project. You'll find everything. I got a ton of free ebooks over on my website. I've just collected these things over the years. I've written these books. Some of them are precursors to some of my for sale books. There's no opt-in or anything. I don't want your email address. I'm not going to send you out stuff. It's literally click on the thing and it's yours. So you could check out, for example, Triad Muscle Revolution, which is the simplest and most basic way to build muscle and strength of calisthenics. And that's kind of a precursor to grind style calisthenics if you're interested.
Perfect. Awesome, Matt. Well, thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day, and happy Thanksgiving, my friend.
You too, Robert. Thank you so very much. I appreciate the opportunity.